Olivia, a newly appointed black police chief, entered the courtroom wearing a minimalist black suit. She walked with firm, confident steps, unhurried, carrying only a simple folder in her left arm, without any visible badge or identification. Simply, a woman whom nobody received, nobody guided to a seat, and nobody dared question what she was doing there. Nathan, a white veteran sergeant with 19 years of service, was the first to notice her, not because she seemed unfamiliar, but because she didn't try to disguise her presence. He examined her from head to toe, glancing at the empty seat at the end of the row near the bathroom, a place nobody wanted unless they had no choice, and then deliberately placed himself in her path, creating a distance that needed no words. To be understood. Nathan leaned slightly, coming closer, pretending not to notice her presence, then passed by her, his shoulder brushing against hers, a light touch, as if marking territory. Soon after, he pulled a handkerchief from his breast pocket and cleaned his own shoulder with a deliberate movement, a gesture that lasted less than 2 seconds, but was enough for a young officer nearby to raise an eyebrow. When Olivia reached her row, she noticed that her designated seat had been moved. The small sign that previously said "Invited Observer" had been replaced by a blank card placed in the last row against the wall, next to the women's bathroom and near the records file. A court clerk said loudly that nobody displaced that sign, and no one corrected him. No one met her eyes as she walked to that seat without complaining or asking for explanations. Nathan returned to his original spot near the courtroom door, took a sip of cold coffee, and turned to a familiar lieutenant beside him, muttering loud enough, "That kind can sit in hearings too." The words came out like a comment about the weather, and the lieutenant shrugged and smiled, while others didn't laugh, but didn't object either. That silence confirming that, in the court of justice, not everyone believed each person had the right to be there. A security camera on the ceiling swept the corridor, capturing the exact moment when Nathan rolled his eyes and turned his head with that characteristic smile, half grin, half sneer. He didn't know he was being recorded, or if he knew, he didn't care, as he had done this many times without anyone questioning. For him, injustice wasn't a problem, as long as the person wasn't his friend, didn't look like him, and most importantly, didn't dare speak up. The trial began after a 15-minute delay, with the white judge banging his gavel with a soft but cold sound. The charges were read. An officer accused of excessive force against an unarmed black youth, while Olivia remained motionless, not taking notes, simply looking at the witness stand where a young man in a light blue shirt sat rigidly, fingers interlaced, eyes nervously turned toward the 3 uniformed officers in the first row. Nathan paid no attention to the witness as he was watching the woman in the back of the room, not to discover who she was, but to confirm that she was nobody, a presence without name, without voice, without power. A report was read aloud about repeated patterns of excessive force by officers, particularly in the precinct that Nathan had once led. And Olivia turned a page, the sound of the paper cutting Nathan's ears like a knife, making him turn his face, then remember the cameras and straighten up. The trial continued, but the chill in the room no longer came from the air conditioning. It came from the space that no one dared name, from the silence of a black woman deemed unworthy to be there, but who remained seated anyway, like a question no one had the courage to answer. When Olivia rose from her seat, the whole atmosphere seemed to take a step back, each of her steps echoing across the granite floor without sound, but drawing glances as if caught by an invisible thread. In the long, sterile white corridor, where the sound of footsteps usually belonged only to those authorized to speak, Nathan was already waiting, casually leaning against the wall near the witness restroom, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a paper coffee cup, eyes fixed on her. Silhouette like a lazy predator not yet satisfied. When she approached, he displayed a crooked smile, not of greeting, but a smile meant to cut like a blade. "Assistant," Nathan said the word sharply like a slap in the face. No name, no introduction, just a single term thrown as if summoning someone to fetch coffee or carry files during a morning meeting. She stopped, her gaze revealing neither surprise nor hurt. Just a quietness settled in the depths of her eyes, like a stream long accustomed to flowing against the current. He examined her from head to toe, his gaze undisguised, like a buyer inspecting goods not yet labeled at an auction, followed by a sharp whistle that cut like a blade, passing by her ear. "I wonder if you even have a real invitation." The corridor wasn't crowded, but full enough for that comment to ricochet off the stone walls and land clearly in the minds of nearby onlookers. While a young officer near the wall telephone paused his report mid-sentence, and a security guard silently turned, pretending to adjust his belt. Olivia didn't respond, just moved forward, her eyes passing over him without stopping. But Nathan raised his hand, pointing to the right. "The seats for guests are that way. This isn't staff territory," he said in the tone of someone correcting a lost dog. She stopped, not turning completely, just leaning slightly, eyes fixed on the glass doors at the end of the corridor, where sunlight spilled like a silent reminder that the world still had a sun, even if inside this place it was blocked by the narrow gazes of men like Nathan. She pulled a firm card from her coat pocket, not to show him, but to look at it herself. The row was clearly printed, seat B4, fourth row on the left, well within the area reserved for senior officers and strategic advisors. She looked up again. This time her eyes met Nathan's, not with warmth, not with blades, just clarity like a nod to a poisonous breeze, and continued walking. When Olivia approached the seating area, a staff member in a grey vest positioned herself. "In front. Sorry, this section is only for senior command and internal personnel," the woman said quickly, her eyes fixed on the guest pass Olivia was holding. Olivia offered her invitation. The staff member examined it briefly and then pressed her lips together. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. Invited observers must sit in the outer row." Her voice was timid, but her eyes seemed instructed, as if someone had warned her in advance. "If you see that woman, push her out." No protests, no questions. Olivia turned and walked on her own toward the outer row, but each step she took seemed to sculpt the corridor floor, leaving behind invisible cracks in an already frozen air, while Nathan returned to his original spot near the courtroom door, sipped from a cup of cold coffee, and turned to a nearby lieutenant. "See, everyone thinks they belong here just because they're holding a piece of paper." The lieutenant smiled, but something in his eyes prevented the smile from staying long, while an elderly attorney with disheveled white hair passed by them pushing a file briefcase, stopping for about 3 seconds to look at Olivia being pushed out. He shook his head slightly, mumbling under his breath as he moved away. "Thought we'd moved past this already." The word hitting the silent wall, building itself around her, not to save, but to confirm that this injustice wasn't new. Nathan remained. They're like a man who had regained dominion over the space, not through justice, not through hierarchy, but simply because he believed men like him should have the keys to every door in this building. While Olivia took a seat against the wall, a solitary black woman in the whitewashed corridor of justice, where nobody asked her name, nobody introduced her, nobody needed to know where she came from, and for Nathan, that was a silent victory. Olivia opened the file folder on her lap, whose first page was an organizational chart of the city police department. She took a blue marker and traced a line under one name, slowly, without hesitation. Nobody saw this, but if someone had turned around, they might have noticed that silence doesn't mean powerlessness, and composure is sometimes the final preparation before the fiercest counterattack. The words in the file were still unfinished when Olivia gently closed the folder, her gaze as motionless as a winter lake. But this lake wasn't calm. It was just hiding the underground currents, waiting for the wind. She stood up, letting her eyes wander down the corridor where the crowd had begun to disperse in preparation for the closed-door session between the relevant parties. The soft click of shoes on marble not echoing loudly, but unmistakable. Everything in this building seemed designed to preserve order, but that very order had become the perfect excuse for small injustices to trickle through every corner of the corridor. In each glance, in each breath, and Nathan was still standing there, this time not pretending to go anywhere, not bothering to mask his behavior, just waiting, not to talk, but to assert that no matter how far she walked, this space still belonged to him. Olivia approached without hesitation, without avoidance. But just 3 steps from him, Nathan began to move, neither hurried nor slow, but timed perfectly to block her path, crossing with a stack of papers, though he wasn't reading them, his eyes fixed on her face, a silent declaration of war. He held firm, his shoulders wide enough to completely obstruct the path, feet planted as if ready to maintain this position until she chose to turn back. Olivia didn't stop, just slowed her pace, standing close, near enough that they could both hear each other's breathing. Nathan gave a soft laugh, as if savoring background music only he could hear, then suddenly raised his hand and touched the folder she was holding, without permission, without explanation, without reason, except the self-assigned authority of a man too accustomed to controlling everything before him. His dry fingers rested on the edge of the folder, as if ready to turn a page, or at least prove he had the right to touch whatever he wanted. And Olivia didn't flinch. Her eyes remained steady, lips tight, her face unwavering, as if that silence was the sharpest defense of all. Nathan released the edge of the page, curled his lip and hissed between his teeth, "I don't take orders from your kind." Each word coming out slow, deliberate, as if he wanted every syllable to engrave itself on her skin, not as a warning, but as an already sharpened blade. A young officer carrying a file passed by and saw the entire scene, paused mid-step, his expression uncertain, then lowered his head as if looking for something in his pocket, his hand briefly closing, then relaxing again. Nobody said a word, and that was the real sting. The silence of those who see the wrong but fear the price of being right. Olivia didn't respond, just tilted her head slightly, lowering her eyes to the folder as if rereading a line of internal protocol, then maneuvered around Nathan without offering a word of apology. Nathan backed up half a step, not to give passage, but to avoid being touched by her, the disgust in his eyes now evident. But beneath that disgust, there was a flash of confusion, so subtle that not even he had recognized it yet. Why hadn't she reacted? Olivia continued walking without looking back, without sighing, without seeking allies, the corridor ahead opening up. Not because anyone stepped aside, but because she never stopped to wait for anyone to do so. She walked as if nobody had ever tried to block her. But the air of the corridor was still cold, and the hand that had just brushed the folder in her arms didn't withdraw. Instead, it moved quickly, rudely, without announcement, and invasively. Nathan reached out and grabbed the handle of her bag, pulling it toward him. The movement wasn't violent enough to hurt, but created a visible imbalance in the space. A white man in a faded police uniform grabbing a black woman's bag without asking, and without hiding his intention, just checking. "Fake invitations are easy to make," Nathan muttered, his voice hissing with the condescension of someone who believed that the right to inspect without cause came built into the badge pinned to his chest. Nobody around intervened. People either hurried their steps or moved away. Some looked, then quickly averted their gaze, as if staring at the truth for too long was itself a dangerous act. Olivia didn't change position, didn't pull the bag back, didn't push his hand away. Her hand remained on the strap, firm enough not to be pulled, but not aggressive enough to provoke an open conflict. Her gaze rose, neither fierce nor submissive. It was the look of someone who had taken note, a precise and unwavering record, like ink permanently stamped on paper without need for repetition. "You should be grateful I haven't called security," added Nathan, accompanied by a weak nasal laugh, as if what he had just done was some form of mercy she should appreciate. But she merely inclined her head slightly, wordless, without response. Though for a fraction of a second, Nathan could see something change in her eyes, not fear, not anger, a silent movement of recognition. Nathan released the strap, though not out of guilt, perhaps just bored with a search that yielded nothing, or perhaps unable to endure the gaze that didn't retaliate, that made him feel as if he was speaking to something beyond his ability to command. He adjusted his collar and turned away, in time to miss the woman standing silently at the end of the corridor near the elevator, a middle-aged employee pulling out her phone, quietly raising it and pressing the capture button. There was no click, no flash, just a soft touch, and the frame froze at the exact moment when Nathan pulled his hand from Olivia's strap, his eyes still narrowed in mockery and her face still motionless, like a statue that didn't need words to demand attention. Olivia picked up her phone, a simple matte black device, no bright case, no dangling charms. Opened the voice recording app and slid her finger across the screen. Didn't need to look. Her hands knew the movement as if she had done it hundreds of times. Olivia didn't raise the phone, as if confronting someone, simply kept it in the palm of her hand, her thumb pressing the record button as it worked, capturing Nathan's voice, still echoing down the corridor. Words like fake, invitation, should be grateful I haven't called security, each one captured syllable by syllable in a no longer anonymous space. A few seconds later, she stopped the recording, saved it under a brief, complete name, and returned to her seat, opened the folder again, and resumed reading as if nothing had happened. The courtroom doors opened, white light spilling over the brown wooden benches, and each step that echoed across the floor hit like the final countdown before collapse. Nathan entered, but his walk was no longer that of a man in control. It was agitated, contracted, like someone who knows their control is slipping away. He saw her instantly, without needing to scan the room, and what destabilized him wasn't her appearance, it was her persistence. She was still there, not retracted, not softened, not averting from his gaze, raising her head, her stare colder than the fluorescent light flooding the chamber. Nathan advanced without warning, without permission, swung his arm and hit Olivia's shoulder. A push, so violent that the folder in her hands flew to the floor, papers scattering like shredded leaves in a storm. The air froze for a second, all eyes turning to them, some people gasping as if they had taken a punch to the chest. He roared, saliva spraying amid the shout like shards. "I don't take orders from someone without a uniform and with the wrong skin color." Each word landed like a blow. No knives, no weapons, just poison and distorted conviction as the room densified and a man from the row of public seats pulled out his phone, held it up, his hand trembling slightly, but keeping focus. Another shouted, "Put that away, this isn't a zoo." But the camera kept recording, and the video continued registering every frame, every shout, every look, preserved not for now, but for what would come next. Olivia bent down slowly, unhurried, picking up each paper as if nothing justified rushing. This act, without response, without refutation, was itself a reverse slap, stronger than any punch. Nathan looked down, waiting for a reaction, but there was none. No fixed stare, no words, not even hatred, just an emptiness so absolute it erased him, and that was what shook him most. The courtroom doors opened once more, and Judge Wilson, known for his cold impartiality, advanced holding an updated file from the clerk's desk. He looked across a room frozen by one man's actions, then set down the file and tapped the bench softly, his voice slow but clear. "If the chief would like a recess, we'll pause the hearing." The room shattered, not with sound, but synchronized. Glances, as Nathan's forehead tightened, his back locking as if struck by a force he couldn't see, and he turned toward Olivia, still seated, both hands resting on her knees, as if nobody had touched her. Calmly, Olivia reached for her coat pocket and removed a small black object, a leather wallet with no badge on the outside. She opened it, turned it forward. No need to hold it high, no need to speak loudly, no need to reaffirm anything. Inside the wallet, an ID card with a silver border reflected the room's light, clearly printed. Chief of Police Olivia. Top left corner, an identification photo, formal and direct, her gaze piercing every false assumption the system had ever built. She closed the wallet gently and for the first time spoke, not to accuse, not to challenge, but simply to state a verifiable fact. Chief Olivia, I'm here today just to observe. Just one sentence, but it burst the balloon of empty authority Nathan had clung to for so long. He didn't retreat, didn't advance, just stopped breathing, his hand trembling slightly while a pen clipped to his shirt pocket fell, clinking against the courtroom floor like metal echoing through a cathedral, and he didn't bend to pick it up. Because if he did, he feared he would never rise again, not under the weight of every gaze now upon him.